All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. I am so glad we've got such a large group joining us today for our May legislative and advocacy update. Lots and lots to talk about, so much so that we extended from our originally scheduled 30 minutes to an hour just in case we needed it. I don't think we'll go that long, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, especially those of you who originally signed up thinking that you had a half hour and may have another meeting at the bottom of the hour. So I'm going to try and cram a lot into the front half while still leaving time for questions today. We've got a great group of individual arts advocates. We have representatives from nonprofits and our partner groups who we work with, like Allied Arts and Tulsa Arts Alliance, and of course, our friends from the Oklahoma Arts Council today to help give us some insight into what's been happening both at a federal level and a state. So with that, I will kick us off. Hopefully you can see my screen. We'll be bouncing back and forth between having some slides up and taking them back down so we can have some great conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Our agenda today is we're going to give a federal update, an Oklahoma update, and then what the heck do I do at this point? Some thoughts and ideas about how to act. I see Margaret nodding in front of me from Mid-America. I used her quote in here of action helps fight anxiety. So we're going to act and give you some ideas of what to do there today. So with that, I'm going to give my very high level of what we've seen happen on a federal update, and then I'm going to turn it over and have Amber give us her much deeper insight fresh off of a recent trip to DC with insider knowledge and like I said, a much deeper knowledge on the federal level. So real quick, I think everybody knows when we're talking about National Endowment for the Humanities, they had a pretty severe cut. Gosh, I've lost track of time. 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, humanities on the federal level was cut. That impacted our Oklahoma State Humanities Agency to the tune of about $100 million in 100,000. And so that was a big hit here in the state. That also hit individual organizations who received, sorry, it always happens, right? The dog starts barking the minute you get on the call, so I apologize. But that also hit individual grantees. So we lost funds through our state humanities council, and then of course direct grants to grantees within the state. Thankfully, the Mellon Foundation, I don't know, in all the news that's been happening, you may have missed this, the Mellon Foundation came through committing $15 million for humanities councils throughout the country that will help give those councils some funds to at least maintain their operations and staff in the short term while we watch some legal battles playing out in the background. So with that, the administration has announced that those funds that they are saving from the NEH will be used for the Garden of the Heroes. So a little update on NEH, some glimmers of hope thanks to the Mellon Foundation, but still important that we are supporting NEH, and because so many of you are getting both NEH and NEA funds. So an important layering of funds within Oklahoma and the impact. So keep that in mind. On the federal level, with the federal budget 2 weeks ago or a week ago Friday, the president's team announced his skinny budget. Within the skinny budget that eliminated NEA, NEH, IMLS, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting overseeing NPR and PBS. So this was expected. This is what had happened in previous Trump administrations, but of course, not a good sign though, not a good signal. A dear colleague letter has gone out with about 100 members of Congress signing on to that in support of the arts. However, we just don't know how this is going to play out. And there are a lot of fears that this time things won't swing back into the NEA's and IMLS's favor like they have in the past, despite the skinny budget. So keep in mind, just like in the state of Oklahoma, where the governor proposes his initial budget, and then our state elected officials weigh in and finalize the budget. On a federal level, the president proposes his budget, and then we're dependent on Congress to actually pass and appropriate funds to these agencies. So just because it was written in the skinny budget, proposed in the skinny budget, that's not the way it necessarily has to play out. Although we have some concerns based on what we've seen with with the executive orders and so on, that it could play out that way. So we want to make sure that we act. So just a lot of unknowns right now for the coming months and what that means to Oklahoma. So also happening on that same Friday, it was a busy, busy day. The NEA had grant termination notices that went out, and you've likely seen a lot of those headlines from across the country where people were notified that their NEA grants were canceled. And I'll let Amber share with you a little bit more about what that meant here in Oklahoma. Thankfully, our impact probably was, although horrible and detrimental, may not have been as large as some of other states where we're seeing many, many groups who received cancellations. So that impacted fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 grants that had been issued. In some places, people had already expended those funds. Maybe they were producing a show and had already spent those monies and now cannot submit for reimbursement, which is a horrible situation to be put in. But those, like I said, there was a huge impact here in Oklahoma, but thankfully not probably as large as some other states and some of the articles that you'll see online. There are things, if for some reason you received a termination letter and we don't know about it yet, we've been trying to, Amber's team has done a great job reaching out to everybody who had grants, asking whether or not you received a termination letter or not. We think we know everybody who did, but if for some reason you did and we're not aware of it, please reach out and let us know so we can include your organization in our database of folks that we're tracking, so that we can make sure we're sharing to our state officials and federal elected officials the impact that we're seeing here in the state, and really understand and have a good understanding of what is happening. There are also ways that you can appeal the termination of the grant. So we want to make sure that we get you in touch with those resources if your organization is indeed impacted. So that was a very high level, very quick overview. I'm going to have Amber go ahead and go into more detail. Apologize for the dog going crazy at the minute I started speaking, but it is what it is. Welcome to the world of Zoom for the last 5 years, and I still can't train the dog correctly. So with that, Amber, can you give us your insights to what you know about NEA and the federal situation?
Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's the lull of the afternoon, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to share some concerning, but also some glimmers of hope. And I hope that this will help us as a sector continue to navigate the maybe disruptions and complexities around this. So I'll just kind of piggyback and maybe repeat or ask Joel to kind of put in the chat a couple of links just to solidify what Danielle was talking about. As everyone probably heard, the president's federal budget for fiscal year 2026 federal, which was released on Friday, May 2nd, did call for the elimination of kind of the three cultural agencies, IMLS, NEA, and NEH. And I'm going to ask Joel to put those in on that link that you see in the chat. The areas of the concerns that we have are listed on pages 39 and 40 under small agencies. Just for a little recap, so U.S. Congress directs that both the NEA and the NEH must distribute 40% of their federal appropriations to the 56 state and jurisdictional state arts agencies, including obviously the Oklahoma Arts Council. So the 40% distribution is primarily focused or based on population and census data. For the current fiscal year, that total for our agency was $1,002,100. That constitutes about 18% of our budget. That usually falls between about 15 and 20%, depending on where our state appropriations are. So good news, we have spent all that money. We drew it down mid-year in January and reallocated our budget mid-year, working with our council, and spent that money. It's out the door. And so the good news for everyone is that those monies should not be rescinded. No state arts agency or regional arts partner were impacted by the recent NEA cuts, and we do not anticipate those. So everyone can stay that you can have some relief that we won't be asking for those funds to come back, and we don't anticipate that that's going to be something that the NEA will ask for. So hopefully that calms some nerves. The 60% remaining budget at the NEA, so if 40% go to region or to state and jurisdictional, the 60% remaining budget of their federal appropriation is distributed through key grant programs like Creative Forces or Our Town, Folk and Traditional Arts, or other arts education and other grant programs. Plus, it covers their administrative costs. So recent and current NEA grant cancellations that were sent to grantees were from this pool of funding only. And as Danielle said, it was twofold. It was either awarded, like offered grants, but that had not actually gone into contracted stance yet, or they were open grants that did not meet the executive orders passed by the Trump administration. So there was a review of all open grants. If they were seen or analyzed to possibly be in conflict with those, then those were then canceled. And so all of the cancellations have been sent out. We do not anticipate any more cancellations of this pool of funding. So if you are an NEA grantee and you have not received a cancellation, your grant should not be impacted. So we feel like that wave is over. Joel from our office, Joel Gavin, our Director of Marketing and Communications, has reached out to all of the NEA grantees, and we have been working with them to get a full list of the individuals or organizations that were impacted by the NEA. But we do know that quite a few were. Oklahoma Arts Institute, the Tulsa Glassblowing School, Sunny Days Mural Fest, and others. And so we know that that impact will be felt deeply across the arts sector. Joel has just put in an article from the Oklahoman. Brandy McDonald also did a feature showcasing some of the stories and what might be at risk with those cancellations in terms of the financial solvency of these organizations or the challenges they're going to have to face with possibly expending monies that they're not going to be given the financial reimbursement for. So that is going to impact our organizations. So let's see. Speaking of, we're looking at the next fiscal year. So the fiscal year 2026 state partnership grant out of that 40%. Normally by this time in April last month, we would have already have received our unofficial award letter telling our agency what to anticipate in terms of our grant award for the next fiscal year. We have heard from the NEA that we will not receive our notification for next year's state partnership grant from the NEA until mid-June. So as you can anticipate, if we normally find out in April and we're going to find out 2 months later, that is going to cause a disruption and a delay in our ability to draft our budget. And so we anticipate, and we want all grantees and constituents to be prepared that we will experience some uncertainty and it will disrupt our normal timeline for our council, our 15-member governor-appointed council, to look at our budget and approve it for the next year. And it will also delay notification for us to execute contracts for the major areas of grant making for the next year. So we anticipate that you will not be receiving letters. If you normally receive a letter at the beginning of the fiscal year, usually like in June or July, you're not going to get that until probably at least August. We will still honor, it's our intent to anticipate to honor the grant period to be retroactive to the beginning of the fiscal year, which is July 1, but you just won't get notification. I just want everyone to be prepared because everyone else is currently in the budget process, and I know how disruptive that can be. To that end, we normally have our 15-member governor-appointed council meet to go over our full budget for the fiscal year, as well as do a very large amount of grant review for the fiscal year. We normally have that meeting the third week of June. We have moved it to mid-July as we anticipate a delay in getting our federal funding notification. Also, if there might be new guidelines or anything new that may come out with these funds and a realignment based on the president's priorities and the administration. Also, we are anticipating, I don't know if you've been reading the paper, but there's quite a bit of uncertainty in the state's budget process, not only with the review of the state's mental health and human services department, but there are other areas that from the federal legislation that may come out with the budget from Congress around Medicaid that could have rippling effects on the state level. So we're still waiting to see what those repercussions might be and how that might impact the state budget. So we need a little bit more time. I have some good news. I just happened to be, it was fortuitous, but I had planned to go to Washington, which I normally don't do. I normally don't really usually have to worry too much about our federal funds in years past, and have spent most of my time communicating with state level leaders about our state appropriations. But it was fortuitous that I happened to go ahead and plan a trip to DC from April 29th through May 1st. So the 2 days before the president's budget was unveiled, I was able to speak and meet with our federal Oklahoma delegation, our 2 state senators, Mullen and Langford, as well as our 5 congressional delegation members and their key policy directors. This is Congressman Cole, Congresswoman Bice, Congressman Hearn, Congressman Lucas, and Congressman Burkeen and their teams. And all of these meetings, I walked away feeling very positive as I was there before the unveiling of the president's budget calling for the elimination, but I did speak very candidly about how we leverage these funds for rural reach, working with arts in the military, folk and traditional arts, supporting populations such as those that serve individuals with disabilities, and making sure all Oklahomans have access to the arts, regardless of your proximity to philanthropy or private funds. And so those conversations, I think, because I was there before maybe the panic or before the surprise, I hope that I was persuasive in just sharing the important work that you all are doing. You made it very easy to talk about your programs in their respective delegation districts. So, a couple of things I will just add. Another glimmer of hope, if you haven't seen it in the news, is that President Trump has nominated Mary Ann Carter to serve as the NEA chairperson once again. This is a great glimmer of hope in all this disruption. Last week, he nominated her to be the chairperson once again. As a reminder, Mary Ann was the chair during the first Trump term. This is a great signal that if the NEA is appropriated at this time, it will be the only federal cultural agency with leadership. And while I know that there are many steps to go to come to fruition and fully build back the cultural infrastructure, we hope this is a first step in seeing the NEA restored, then the NEH and IMLS too. I know that Mary Ann is a proponent of seeing all the cultural agencies thrive, and she knows the importance. I mean, the NEA offices are right in the same building as the NEH. And so I think that I'm going to add one thing too. If you haven't heard Mary Ann speak, something that was incredibly persuasive and I think gives great insight as to her passion for the NEA was she spoke at the NEA Jazz Masters. That was a recent production that they put on to highlight America's jazz history and masters. And in her remarks, in the 40-minute mark, which we'll put that link in the chat if you'd like it, she has some incredibly passionate remarks about the importance of arts in America And so I hope that if you listen to those, this will get you also reinvigorated and a glimmer of light for the work that she's trying to do at the NEA. The NEA does continue to work with the NEH and IMLS, obviously with the NEH shifting to the Garden of Heroes and IMLS having their temporary injunction placed and passed. It's been granted a preliminary injunction. We really do see that the NEA is still moving forward, and this is positive. On May 1st, the NEA Council, their oversight body, did meet. And so that is a great sign that they are trying to move forward in terms of budget and looking at grant making. As I mentioned, the Jazz Masters, and then they also last week had their Poetry Out Loud National Finals in Washington, D.C., where the Oklahoma state finalist was in the final rounds. So we're very proud of our Oklahoma state winner making it to the finals at Poetry Out Loud and representing us. And I think that's great momentum because this is a very important step in the right direction. Let's see, I mentioned that the IMLS has their temporary injunction. 21 states have challenged President Trump's EO 14238, and this was one that impacted, as Danielle mentioned, numerous agencies, including IMLS. They have been granted a preliminary injunction, and we have heard that some of the grant making appears to be, some have seen restoration of some of the grants, so we will continue to watch and keep you apprised of what we see moving forward. So that's the federal update. Moving into the state. So disruption. While it does feel like we've had a lot of disruption, we actually here at the Oklahoma Arts Council plan to experience more disruption in our workspace. And I share this with you because of all the compounding disruptions that we're experiencing, both from external factors plus internal. I wanted you to know in case this impacts when you're trying to contact our team. Many of you know that we temporarily moved into the Department of Agriculture when the Jim Thorpe building renovation was approved by the state legislature. This has been our temporary home. We always tease that we're putting the culture in agriculture, and it's been a great space for us to work in. And we've had some great relationships emerge with Made in Oklahoma and some other agricultural festivals and other branches and areas of government. Unfortunately, our Jim Thorpe building offices will not be ready until spring of 2026, but they are starting to do some renovations in our current building here at Agriculture. This will require that our staff will have to completely vacate this space for the months of June and July. So imagine, you guys, you're trying to do your budget, you're trying to do grant making. We're trying to do ARPA, another 180 grants plus. And so you can imagine our staff will be working remotely on a temporary basis in the hardest months of our budget and grant cycle. These are obviously not decisions we want to see come to fruition, but it's ones where we have no ability to really control. So I just want everyone to know that the final 2 months of grants adjudication and budget development, our staff will be working remotely. And so I ask that you please have patience and understand in terms of delays of us communicating with one another, because it will be an additional strain on our team as we close out this current fiscal year and then try to embark on the next one. So we are coming into the final days of session, finalizing the state's 2026 budget. Sine die, the last day of session, is scheduled for Friday, May 30th. Usually they adjourn the Thursday before. They usually don't work on Fridays unless necessary. This is the deadline for the legislature to draft and negotiate a budget with the governor and his key budget representatives. There's also talk right now, I've already heard, to adjourn 1 week earlier, May 23rd. So we are really in crunch time in terms of the state's budget. As I mentioned at Arts Day, every year, our budget usually is comprised of state appropriations between 70 and 80%, just kind of depending on the year. The House and the Senate budget positions this year that are both listed on the budget transparency portal show increases for our agency, but those costs are tied to the following. For the first time, we will be paying rent to the state when we return to the Jim Thorpe building. So when we were pulled out of the Jim Thorpe building for the renovation, and then we were brought here to Agriculture, upon returning to Jim Thorpe, we will now be charged rent to the state of Oklahoma for the space. So those costs are part of our budget requests. We also have some affiliated costs to our new offices. And then there's a mandatory 4% benefit allowance increase that we cannot also control. This is also mandated. And so I just want everyone to understand that we do not anticipate other budget requests to be approved this year unless some incredible advocacy happens. But I also just want to make sure that we're just as transparent with you all as to the inflationary environment and the constraints and challenges placed before us, as we did make a bold request to increase our grant making by $1.5 million in our grant request. So I don't want you to think that we have not been asking or talking about the need for additional resources for the field, but given the current budget environment, that is very unlikely to be pursued this year. Other budget considerations that I just want everyone to know about. Let's see. First, the governor's income tax. There is talk going back and forth between whether or not the governor's income tax will or will not be pushed through or approved by legislative leaders this year. We're waiting to see. Some of the wait and see is to understand the recently eliminated share of the state's grocery tax, which they estimate to reduce state revenues by $300 million a year, $370 million a year. We're not quite in that full year yet. In addition, Governor Stitt also calls for the legislature to reduce the income tax, putting us on a path to zero in the coming years. So it goes back and forth in what I can see in the paper and the rumblings we're hearing, but those are things to consider, is lower resources and revenue. The second, as I mentioned before, is the question of Medicaid. U.S. Congress is also grappling with what components of Medicaid on the federal level to reduce, cut, or eliminate in shaping next year's budget. Note, Oklahoma is one of 40 Medicaid expansion states, as voters in Oklahoma voted to expand Medicaid coverage and carve it into our state constitution. That means if it is cut from the federal budget, it will automatically be transferred to the state of Oklahoma to fill. So those are things to watch in the news if you're following the budget situation. Last but not least, and then I will turn it over. I know these are a lot of things, but I just want everyone to understand the full scope of the field and be as transparent as possible. Program and staffing freezes. So our agency is also being directed, I'm sure, as we're talking about the NEA reducing their staff. I'm sure if you've seen or are on any listservs or communications and newsletters from the NEA staff, you probably have received notice that many of the program directors at the National Endowment for the Arts are taking buyout or resigning from their positions effective at the end of this month. So we are anticipating a reduction in the federal workforce at the NEA. Not only will this impact our ability as states, but also as direct grantees to see turnaround time, but obviously the strain that's going to have on the remaining staff. So I just asked for both our staff and for the NEA staff that we assume positive intent and kindness as you're engaging with them, because this is really heartbreaking for many of them to walk away from the sector and not work for the federal government in areas that they really are passionate and have great expertise. So we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge. But that same approach to limiting and reducing the government workforce size is also being reiterated on the state level. And so our agency is being directed to reduce our overall staff headcount. And so this means that while positions have been budgeted, when vacancies do occur, many times we are not able to get those vacancies filled. And so we're kind of restructuring and working with a smaller team as we have people leave and go into either the nonprofit or other sectors. And so it's becoming increasingly difficult to recruit great staff, but it's also very hard whenever they do leave for us to fill key positions. So I just want everyone to understand those implications on the state level as well. That's also reflective of what you're seeing, maybe not to the same level as what's happening on the federal level, but it is being reflected on the state level. But finally, I'm very grateful to Oklahomans for the Arts, Kim Cook-Thompson, who's on this call, and Danielle Ezell. I hope I'll just kick it back over to them. for the great op-ed that was published in today's paper from the kind of full coalition, those who were able to sign on, but then those who were not, just including the Oklahoma Humanities Department of Libraries, Oklahoma Museums Association, Allied Arts, Tulsa Arts Alliance, and the Oklahoma Historical Society. We have been working in tandem with OFTA behind the scenes, trying to have as many conversations to prepare and be in unity. So I'm grateful to OFTA for leading this charge and for a great op-ed. And for that, I will turn it back over to them for what's next. Sorry, I talked so long. 6
No,
pages.
you're good, Amber. It was an incredibly detailed. You might want to take it back off mute because we've got 2 questions that are pertinent to your agency in particular. So I want to make sure we get those answered before we move on to the what can you do about all of this ideas. So the first one, Joel answered in the chat that I think if one person had it, we should probably address it, which is, does any of this impact our state ARPA funds that we work so hard to secure for everyone?
No, we feel really good about ARPA, but I will tell you, we are beyond the halfway mark of ARPA. We sent out a letter as part of Arts Day to the state legislature, informing them of the funds that have been spent to date to talk about the successes. I encourage everyone, just because of its administrative burden on our team, if you can draw down the monies as fast as possible, that will help free up some of our time, only because we have a burden of handling kind of all the other unknowns from the state and federal level. But I do not think that those funds are at risk.
You have, Amber, on your team, a couple people really dedicated and focused on those ARPA funds. I know there's an email that's a direct email support on ARPA. Do you remember what it is off the top of your head?
No, but I'm going to have Joel
We'll find it. We'll find it and put it in.
Yeah, we only have one half person extra. Thomas, who's our grants director, took on all of the ARPA on top of it. Our finance department took on all of the extra finance. So, you know, we only got a 2.5% administrative funds related to ARPA. And so we didn't get to have extra staff. So I know the next piece of this is like, what's the call to action? So are there any other questions about the federal update, or do you want to go into the action piece?
Let's go. Okay, and there Jill posted in the chat your ARPA questions can go to arpa@arts.ok.gov. And I know Thomas has developed some great materials and support out there too. The Arts Council is working really hard for you guys to be able to submit these and get the funds turned back around. So take advantage of that support. So let's talk a little bit about what can we do? How can we best support our arts organizations, all of you, on both a federal and state level right now? So I saw this quote earlier today and comment in something, and I thought that is so appropriate. Although we feel, I'm sure many of you feel under attack and a lot of stress and anxiety about the future, remember, just like any other year, although it's more important this year, it feels more important, but every year it's important that we renew our public support for the investment in the arts. It's not the first time we face these kinds of threats. It won't be the last time. And we just have to be cognizant that every time we're out and about in public, every time we're interacting with an elected official, we can't take any of this funding or this support for granted. So we have to continually be using tactics and advocacy tactics to bolster support, to show everybody around us that this is indeed a great investment and good for Oklahoma. So keeping that in mind, these are things we should be doing all of the time. I'm going to skip ahead because you know, Amber mentioned we are in the last 2 weeks. I had not heard that we are maybe in the actual last week and a half of our legislative session. So this is the time again that they will be working on our state arts council's budget and state budget. It has to be done before they can dismiss or go sign e-die at the end of this month. And we've got to take action on multiple levels this year, both the federal and the state. And as Margaret would say to us, action fights anxiety. It's so much better to take action and do something than sit there worrying about the future and things we can't control. So let's control what we can control and do what we can. On a federal level, it would be great for you to reach out to your congressional representatives. And what you want to let them know is not only asking them for support of the arts, of the NEA, NEH, IMLS in the federal budget, but make sure anytime you're interacting with them that you are letting them know how that public funding is impacting you in your community. It's really important that we get the word out in a way that they can relate in their own districts. So how is that funding creating jobs, sales tax, community within their districts in your local area? And making sure that you're stressing that to them, and that without that continued investment, those arts festivals, programs, arts education programs that they've enjoyed in the past, musical performances, may not exist in the future. So helping them connect the dots between something that they enjoy and they've seen and they're aware of in their districts that is going on to, well, that's not, could be eliminated in the future or greatly reduced without those funds. We can't take for granted that they know about what's being funded, that, for example, that Sunny Days was receiving a big NEH grant. Those elected officials in the Oklahoma City metro area, they don't get down to that level of detail. So helping them understand the direct impact is really important. You can go to the OFTA website in order to find your elected official, their contact information, or to submit an email to them online there. Easy to do. So also, we want to do a similar thing on the state level. So number one, as far as next steps, is call Congress to ask them to support the arts. We also need, just like you've been doing for the past few weeks, ever since Arts Day and before, reaching out to your Oklahoma House Rep and Senator, thanking them for their continued investment in the arts and asking them to continue to preserve the Arts Council's funding going forward. Even more critical than usual this year because of those potential cuts in the federal funds. We can't, none of you can afford a cut to the state budget on top of what we may see on a federal level come to fruition. So very important. And you share the exact same stories with them. Do you realize that Sunny Days was funded partially through an NEA grant or through, in your case, different arts councils grants, and letting them know exactly which programs that they've enjoyed receive those state funds or federal funds. Making sure that you have those relationships. I know a lot of people find this intimidating, right, to talk to your elected official, but they are just people. So making sure that you are building long-term relationships. I would ask you to make a commitment today that if you have an upcoming event, show, opening, anything that's coming up on your calendars, make sure that you are at least inviting your elected official, your local elected official, to that event or happening. Again, it's almost as important, the ask is as important as if whether or not they can make it or not. Getting on their radar, making sure they know what's happening, and then hopefully developing that long-term relationship. So make a commitment that you are inviting them to your events, and even better would be making, after they get through the next couple weeks and they're back in their districts, grabbing coffee, educating them about how the arts are impacting their community, how those state and federal funds are being used in their districts. Another thing that we don't always think about doing, or that we don't leverage always as well as we could, because we all have a gazillion things going on, is to look at your board. a lot of you have nonprofit boards of fairly active, engaged members of your community. Do those board members or patrons or donors have relationships with those elected officials? Here in Oklahoma, it feels like we all have, one or less degrees of separation between us. Can somebody on your board reach out to that elected official? Do they already have a relationship? Or can you at least ask the board, as well as yourself and your organization, in addition to your voice reaching out to your elected officials in supports of the arts in your community, ask your board. Boards are always looking for how they can help you. They're frequently confused, and they attend a board meeting and then they're like, what else can we do? This is a great thing to ask them to do, is to pick up the phone, write an email. You can give them a template. You can use templates that we have or other resources that you'll find online. Happy to share, but giving them a to-do and an ask at your next board meeting would be great, if not before, in these really urgent, important next few weeks. So as always, I want to thank our supporters, the Oklahoma Arts Council, Mid-America Arts Alliance, the Chickasaw Nation, and Kirkpatrick Family Fund. I'm going to switch to the next slide and leave it up while we open up the forum for additional questions, but that QR code will help you sign up for the Often newsletter, where you can see additional alerts and information. With that, what questions can we answer for you today?
I'm going to see if it's okay, Danielle, for me to address. I think Tiffany had a couple of questions around sunny days regarding minority small business owners, and then also with their cancellation of the NEA grant. So a couple of things I would say is, when you're working with congressional members, finding what is important to them and then aligning and finding ways that you have shared and authentic alignment with the goals that they have, that they're leveraging the NEA to fulfill presidential or legislative on a congressional level goals, is really key. So things that might be important to Sunny Days or to another nonprofit may not necessarily be as important to legislative members or congressional members. Key is to find a place of commonality. One of the things that I would highlight is in the cancellation letters that went out from the NEA, I noticed there was language around the support and prioritization of Hispanic community events and community development, historic Black colleges and universities, and other areas that were laid out as important areas of priority for this administration. So what I would say is, if you have commonalities in what you're trying to accomplish, talk through that lens and use that same level of case making, even if it doesn't align with all of your organization's values, because what you're trying to share with them is that they have a goal and a platform and an agenda, and you're trying to figure out ways of commonality rather than maybe conflict. That is going to be more persuasive in trying to talk about the work that you're doing and how you can be in alignment. Doesn't mean you have to buy on or agree to everything, but those are commonalities, right? As arts are not a partisan thing, it should be something that we have and believe that all the different areas. Okay, thank you, Margaret, for putting those in. These are the projects that were listed in the NEA's cancellation. These were the things that were outlined based on the president's EOs, HBCUs, and Hispanic serving institutions, celebrating the 250th anniversary of American independence, fostering AI competency, empowering houses of worship to serve communities, assist with disaster recovery, et cetera. You can see all of these things. If you can find commonalities in this, then this might be a way to be persuasive in the work that you're doing, or presenting it in ways that you might find ways that there can be some cross collaboration. The questions about why were certain NEA grants eliminated and others were not. I do know that those were looked at through a lens of did they have any, was there any apparent non-compliance with any of the EOs? If any information on the impact of the NEA grant termination will have on future funding from the agency. I do believe, while I can't say with certainty, that I do think whenever you're applying to the NEA or that you consider that if you have language that goes in direct conflict with a presidential EO, you are jeopardizing your grant application. I've never heard that from the NEA, but I'm just giving you that advice from the agency that I would consider thinking through this lens of what are the priorities of the administration, and if you can find commonality in any of these areas, talking about the nature of your work that does align with as many of these that are authentic, right? We're not changing who we are, but just saying if there is an authenticity that you can say, hey, I'm working to support military and veterans in my work as an organization, then you put that forward. You talk about that as a priority of your work because it is an authentic. So I think that's just areas where you can try to be persuasive in showing that.
We had a question about the video, the recording of this meeting. We have all of this meeting as well as past ones. Give us a few hours for it to render and for us to edit down the extraneous information at the beginning. But yes, we post those on our Off to YouTube channel, as well as send out a link after the fact so that you can review this and grab any information that we went over quickly that you didn't have a chance to. But all of this one and any future ones, as well as past ones, we put out on our YouTube channel. Sorry, I'm trying to screen through the questions. Yeah, can relate. Janine put in one about it feels like we contact our elected officials and sometimes that just kind of goes into a void and we don't know how effective it is or if it's making a difference. As somebody who has worked up at the Capitol, I can assure you that it is important, even if you don't hear back from them, they do hear both from their on a state level and a federal that people are contacting the office. They have systems to keep track of what topics and inquiries that they're getting in the office and recording and keeping those letters and emails that you're sending. So rest assured, even if you aren't hearing anything, they are getting them. Now, it is really important though to like just because you did it last year, it doesn't mean we can assume that that same elected official is even going to remember. A lot of life has happened for them, a lot of bills, a lot of urgent fires have gone on. So it's important every year to, again, renew and repeat that story of why that investment is important to you as a voter and important to you as a business owner, nonprofit executive, and advocate for our state. Amber had mentioned to me and had shared some data with me too that, and you all live this every day, we cannot expect our nonprofit community and private sector donors to fill these gaps if there are cuts to funding. We saw a statistic that showed that I believe 20 counties in Oklahoma, 20 of the nonprofits that were receiving federal grants were not receiving any additional private funding. So in the state of Oklahoma, we have some philanthropic deserts that if this funding goes away, there's no balance of funds that were even there to begin with to fill in the gap. So incredibly important, in particular in our rural counties here in the state, that the funding is secured and these programs go on, because we'll have things that just go away for our kids and communities there. That would be a horrible shame.
I'll just add two things. I will reiterate what Danielle said We mentioned this in a couple of the newspaper articles that, your proximity to philanthropy should not be the thing that holds whether or not you get access to high quality arts education or arts access across the state. There are 20 counties which the top 1,000 foundations do not fund any of these counties in our state out of the 77. So that is a major component of this. Margaret put some great notes in the chat about Congressman Cole as the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. I would say that Oklahoma punches way above its weight in terms of our congressional members. That's why Oklahoma advocacy is really important, because while we are a small rural state, we have a lot of really important leaders that have a lot of influence, especially with this administration. But key components of that are Congressman Tom Cole in District 4. When I was with all of them and I followed up with them, I gave them a listing of all the funding in their district. So if you reach out to them and you're in their district and you're getting funded, they're going to know it. They're going to see it. So you're then the storytelling component. You bring the person and the people to them. I brought them the numbers. Now you're telling them the story of the people in their communities that matter. I'm talking to them about who's being funded, but you're telling them how their lives are being transformed. You're saving kids' lives. You're helping veterans. You're helping with suicide prevention. You're helping under-resourced communities. You are the ones doing the work. And so you guys are the ones that have the most compelling storytelling, plus you're their voters and their constituents as well. Congresswoman Bice is also involved in the appropriations. The others, it's important that they support Congressman Cole and Congresswoman Bice, who are key in terms of the decision making, but it's good that our entire delegation hears these stories so they can go to their colleagues like the leaders in appropriations and say, hey, I'm getting calls and I know I'm not at the table right now, but I want to tell you I'm hearing these stories and I'm worried about it, or I'm worried about my town, or I'm worried about my district. And I would just say it's with a lot of this disruption and a lot of it feeling like you're losing control and you're losing maybe your sense of security. It's easy to walk in anger and justifiable frustration. What I would say is walk in kindness. It's always easier to get them with the honey and the sugar. Being kind to people and assuming positive intent, you're going to be much more persuasive if you are. It doesn't mean that you can't tell the truth, right? Always being authentic and truthful, but speaking to people with respect, even if you don't see eye to eye on other policy and other agendas and other areas. It's important that you're trying to find commonality in this one place, the place that you work, the sector that you work. So I know that's hard and it's complex, and it's hard to keep the hats of diplomacy on when you're frustrated and you feel like you're losing heart. That's extremely difficult. I understand it because I feel like I have to do it every day, and it can be very hard whenever you're trying to be persuasive. But yes, you're in it for the long haul, not the next 4 months only, but the next few years. So reaching out and trying to establish a relationship that you're going to come back and see that person later, and they will remember if you were respectful and inquisitive and asking them questions. Why do you take this stance? Like, what is it that you're concerned about? Tell me what you think might go on. Let them also give voice, and then you are able to make a compelling case for the value of your work. One last question I will acknowledge too. I want to make sure, and there was questions about the NEA appeals process. I feel confident that they will not allow organizations to regroup or restructure any canceled grants, but I do think that if you appeal, that you look at those priority areas, and if you can make a compelling case, that would be the strategy that you say is that the work that we do fits these goals as outlined in the chat where Margaret had placed them. If you can talk about one or more of those, then I say try to appeal it using those case making.
I, of course, am not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice, but I would file your appeals so that you are on the record, because we don't know legally what will transpire in the months to come. So you want to have lodged your appeal and make sure you're part of the public record of appealing that in case somewhere along the line something is overturned that would positively impact you in that appeal. So definitely do that. Well, with that, we are coming to a close. A few other things Kim had put in the chat, but please, please, please reshare this op-ed that was in the Oklahoman today. There are been, Brandy McDowell has done a couple different articles. There was one on our state and then one this weekend about sunny days, I think, and the funding there. So anything like that that you can reshare to spread the word about the impact of these cuts in Oklahoma here locally is wonderful, and we appreciate those efforts. So again, today, my call to action to you is to really do three things. The first is to reach out to your federal representative, your congressional member, asking them to support the arts. Your second is to reach out to your local House and Senate members, asking them to please preserve and safeguard funding for the Oklahoma Arts Council as we go into the last few weeks of session. And then the third is to think about what's one other thing or one event you could invite your elected official to coming up in the next month, or if you don't have that, go ahead and after session, trying to find a time to meet one-on-one with them, invite them. Always great for them to come to you, for you to show them your theater facility, office if you have it, and meet your folks. So please consider those three things, take that action, do control what you can control, and we will all together hopefully be able to make a difference here in Oklahoma. So with that, we are concluded today. Thank you everyone so much.